Are we live?
We are live. A little red button up there.
I got a whole bunch of pop-ups telling me something that went wrong. Well, sorry. Welcome to Cerberus at the Improv. I'm one of your co-hosts, Payman Ascari. Tim, before the reason I said, X is having problems since the last 24 hours, so I guess we're not streaming to X. How does that make you feel, Tim?
It wonders how much of Bell Media is wrapped up in X.
You think Bell Media is sabotaging us?
No, they're sabotaging themselves. This is the second major outage they've had in, 2 years?
I don't know what's going on. Andre, do you know? Is it Bell related? Is it X?
Well, I don't know, but I know that Québécois in Quebec is practically bankrupt, and the government wants to bail in another private company that is bullshitting Canadian and Quebecers. So, and you mentioned earlier Bill C-63. Maybe it's a virtual version of this bill.
So why don't we just jump right into it? Bill 63, is it possible that Mark Carney passed it even though Parliament is prorogued?
Well, they spent 70 billion in 2 weeks without asking nobody. So and without a budget. So.
Yeah, welcome to Canada. Tim?
All you really need is to put each of the party leaders into the Prime Minister's office and say, do we agree to the terms of this bill? Are we going to pass this into law? And when they all say, yeah, we speak for our party, we agree to it, which is exactly what they did with Bill C-4, what stops them from doing it again? And as far as the minimal required terms, they'd probably meet them. So you don't need, at this point, because they've completely disregarded the Constitution and all of the bylaws underneath it, and Robert's Rules of Order, and the Westminster practice, all they really need is to stand around in a circle, sing Kumbaya, right, and agree to what they're going to agree to, because their general is going to write the check to pay for it.
That's the title of the episode, and we're in limbo.
We're in
limbo.
limbo.
Don't know if you will go to hell or to paradise. You still have to pay, or maybe you need to have a QR code in front of St. Peter so you can go in. There's no country anymore. There's no government. There's no budget. There's no opposition. And I will say I have a small statistic. It was 8,595,498 voters who voted for the Liberal. So those people do not care or understand what is happening. For them, they live in a virtual reality, and they're happy. They don't complain. Nobody's complaining. Who's complaining on X or alternative media? Only us sometimes, and some people who are. But who are complaining really?
A surprising number of conservative supporters are also not complaining.
Yes, of course. They're not complaining. They must be happy.
I think I started the show a little. It was a cold start because of the X issues. What we want to talk about this episode is, like, your parties are sort of upstream from government. So we want to talk about what should go into the party constitution that we want to see reflected in government. And we're kind of working our way backwards now. So when we're like, yes, the country's in a very bad position, but like, let's talk about what has Carney done that's completely unprecedented. So it's
everything?
Besides everything, but specifically spending money when Parliament is closed. I guess you're not allowed to do that, and they cheated through the Governor General.
Well, you know what happened just after the election. Discreetly, Carney removed all tariff applied to United States, of them.
Even during the process, he reduced most of them.
So you can imagine he lied to people with this stupidity of elbows up, and we will fight back against Trump and United States, and he removes everything. And last week he was in the White House. So what? You know,
That
he lied.
explains why during the election Trump said, "I like that, Carney," is because
Well,
Carney was using his playbook with distraction.
well, there's one thing that we don't have in Canada. We don't have a constitution, because if you would have a constitution and you lie under oath in United States, you can be subpoenaed in the Congress and you can be prosecuted. Here, there's nothing. Nothing happened.
Well,
Nothing happened.
and nothing would happen because the SNC Lavalin interference was proof that nothing would happen.
Yes, that was what 8 years ago.
Right,
So-
and it's one thing that Trudeau interfered with the Justice Minister's office, right, in that situation, but the other thing is that under questioning, he lied and got away with it.
Yes. Yes,
That happens in the
same.
U.S. too. They sometimes lie. Well, the presidents have lied.
Well, they
But,
sometimes lie. No, they often lie.
Who was it? Was it Brennan who said, "I gave the smallest lie possible"? Like he lied to Congress, where he said he wasn't spying on the U.S. citizens, and he got away with it. So, yes,
Well, the line
obstruction. Sorry.
it's a thin line between a lie and, I would say, an explanation.
I was going to say, don't say white lie because that's racist.
But
I guess I'm using the U.S. as a gold standard.
Mm.
I'm saying the U.S. they also obstruct justice. Yes, it happened with SNC Lavalin, but we don't have co-equal branches of the judiciary here. Like the Supreme Court it reports to the Prime Minister.
well, I
And it's
think
not
when it
supposed
doesn't, sorry, I think when it doesn't touch the elite, the justice will prosecute offenders. Think about Bernard Madoff, who stole $50 billion, and he was prosecuted and he was condemned to 125 years in jail. He died a couple of years ago, and because he was part of the elite, but I think he was dispendable. Look at what is happening to Ursula von der Leyen now in Europe. They're starting to attack her. She's dispendable now. She's not useful anymore. So she will be removed from that. She will be removed. It is coming. It is because she's dispendable. Her job is done. The job is done. Let's put someone else, a fresh face. More. A new product. Rebranding.
Yeah. Trudeau was the same.
Trudeau
When they
was
were
the same
done,
with Carney.
they replaced him, and they replaced him so blazingly fast that people thought it was a different party.
It is incredible how they can fool people.
Maybe the people want to be fooled.
And that's masochism.
But I prefer the delusion because the reality requires me to act, and I either don't know how to act or I'm afraid to act.
Well, you always referred him to psychological behavior, and we saw it with the COVID mandate and the COVID, let's say, hoax, if I can use the expression. And people, I compare this to, the man is cheating on his wife for 40 years, and the wife thinks she's in love. They have children, and after 40 years, she discovered that she discovered that he's cheating her with her best friend. How can you face that reality? All your world will collapse, and then you will be facing what? So many people, they don't want to face this reality because it's too painful.
What you do is you call the friend, your lifelong friend with whom your husband was cheating, and you complain to her. And then the husband becomes the villain, when the truth is it was your neighbor.
Well, yes, that's a good strategy. That's a really good strategy. But people are so afraid. I use the word tetanized. They are tetanized. They are like, it's like a deer in front of a car. He freezes. They are like that. You talk to them, hello, how are you? And they don't answer. And if you hit a nerve, a small reality, they become angry. Look on social media how people react. As soon as you hit. It's very funny when you look at them. So I think in Canada now, there's the vast majority of population, you control them like how do you
Marionettes.
call this? Uh, flock.
Yeah.
You know, and you can just manipulate them with mainstream media. We know how it works. It is not new.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's talk
on
to
the
solutions.
Point, on the point of constitution and how we end up with a no government, be it a coup or a junta or a troika or whatever this thing is, now that we elected whatever this is, and here they are not operating as a government. They're certainly not operating under the rules of government. We started down this trail in 2015, right? When our own prime minister makes comments about admiring China's basic dictatorship, and Canada is a post-nation state with no cultural identity, ignores the borders and allows the borders to become permeable to all sorts of criminal and activity, disrespects the barriers between the provinces by usurping the authority that they do have left and holding back even more so that which should be constitutionally assigned to them in the first place, completely over centralizes and then responds with increased bloat, hides away the fact that the money going overseas to humanitarian efforts is actually going, is publicly going to woke nonsense overseas, when the truth of the matter is it's probably being pushed into slush funds and laundering pockets related to UN global activities. All of this is happening, and then the convoy happens. So now we have Emergencies Act, the War Measures Act, Coots, right? The Coots 4, the Windsor Bridge, stomping on a woman outside Parliament. All of this activity, Canada recoils and Canada stands up, and Canada's beaten down again, recoils, etc., back and forth in a variety of different ways all across the country, be it with travel bans or lockdowns or moving the goalposts or the number of adding more. So the knock-on effect of an event that was about 2.5 or 3 years, 2020 to about 2023, the knock-on effect on the population is Pavlovian. They will now either recoil or ignore. And so what's happening on Parliament Hill is the rest of the population is ignoring it. And the ones that are on social media making the complaints is a smaller number than before, a more loud number, because now is a clarion call. We've lost our government. It's a Paul Revere moment of sorts. So that's happening, but it's a silo. And so nobody in the real world is expressing these things out loud. Even this show and similar shows like this are restricted to silos of motivated and interested participants.
What are you talking about? We got 2 viewers right now.
Right? There you go.
We're lucky.
Right? We're lucky.
One of them is sleeping while Tim is talking.
My only has it on while they're doing the cooking. All of my neighbors, every one of my neighbors voted Conservative Party of Canada. And the day after the election, they took their lawn signs down, and that was it. Back to regular whatever they did beforehand.
Business as usual.
Business as usual, as much as can be. And right now, the fallout of what's been going on Parliament Hill hasn't yet struck the middle class.
You know,
not in ways that they would admit or protest.
I was watching the price of gas this week. I think in BC it is $1.79 per liter. The price of the Western Texas Intermediate is now $61 per barrel, which is a drop of about 25% since last year. And you can say, wait a second, and they supposedly removed the carbon tax, except in BC and Quebec. And you would say at least you should see a drop in the price of gas. Let's say 5-10 cents. No, the price is increasing. There's one aspect about this. It's the global instability that has an impact on the price of oil.
Can I put a pause to this? because we're drifting now. I want to go back. What is? Sorry, Andre. I want to stick with the Constitution thing. What is the root problem that we're facing in Canada? I've identified two issues. One is the urban centers that they hate Donald Trump. They hate the concept of sovereignty, individual liberty. The other one is sort of the same thing as the NDP. I think the NDP is like I'm going to use this word cancer. It's like a cancer that's infected Canada and all of this budget explosion. What else is there? What other root problems are there in Canada?
I think the root problem is simple. The last time we hung a politician, his name was Louis Riel.
It was a long time ago.
Politicians have no accountability, legal, social, financial, employment-wise, no accountability. They're getting away with it. They're getting away with financial abuse. They're getting away with diplomatic abuse. They're getting away with getting away with their oath of office. They're getting away with murder in some cases.
Okay. But sorry to interrupt. Why are they getting away with it? Is it because the media is running cover? Is it like Brave New World, urban centers? People are just looking for drugs and sex and alcohol?
Yes. What do you think? What do you think? You think people have a moral code today?
These are symptomatic. Our jurisprudence system has absolutely collapsed. There is no justice. The police have stopped bothering to bring people in for crimes because judges are kicking them back out to the street 24 hours later.
Yes. Forget about Canada. Does not exist anymore.
That's it. There is no parent to smack the bottom of the bad child. There is no discipline. There's no self-discipline, and there's no corporate and community discipline. No punishment for the crimes. So you go back.
Accountability.
Dostoevsky does it because he can get away with it, and the only way he actually got right, and then ended up, because it's a morality tale, does himself in because of his own guilt. But that means morality exists within all men, and that's what he's really getting at. In our culture, laws were made for the unjust, not the just. So if judges are not passing sentence according to the criminal code, then eventually people will stop going to the justice system for due process and justice, remedy for the things of which they've been made victim. And those who can get away with it will. And that will escalate.
Yes, that's what I'm expecting. Think about the Agenda 2030. So you talk about solution payment. What would be the solution? Now we're identifying the problems. We know it's systematic collapse. It doesn't show. We still have electricity. We still have supermarket. The trading. And the market are still recovering, even if after the 100 days of Trump, and he was, fooling around with tariff and making everybody going hysteric. It's still collapsing very slowly. And don't forget about what Tim mentioned. The insecurity will just increase, and people who will not be able to have justice in this country, and they can get away with it, they will do justice. They will take justice in their own hand. What we try to avoid in a civilized society, we delegate violence to a higher institution. Violence meaning justice, resolution of conflict in a democratic and a civilized way. We do it because else, if your neighbor robs you, you will go and shoot him or you beat him. So we don't. That's the basic of a civilized society. We are seeing it falling apart right in front of our eyes. Most people don't want to see this because they still have benefit. Don't forget, when we're talking about 30% of the working force in Canada is paid by government level of government, municipal, federal, provincial, or federal. So 30%, a third of the population is protected economically. The 60 or 70% of the rest of the population, some of them are wealthy, some of them are really poor. I will again refer to Russia because my wife, she always makes fun of this. She says in Russia, you have 4 classes of citizens: very rich, poor, and very poor. you don't have a middle class, and because the middle class is the class that is stable. Usually, it is the class that it is stable, and this is on the middle class, small businesses that you rely. You know, even if you have a Walmart that is closed, you have small shops. You can still live. Today, we're seeing it falling apart slowly, and we see some symptom of it. The government is prorogued since December, and they're paid what, $175,000 plus expense for a backbencher. Without you know, if you're attending a committees, you will have a prime. They're paid what, $250,000 a year, and they don't sit in the house. What? Why people? You mentioned it, payment in one of your comments. Why do we still pay taxes? How come we're not in an insurrection mode? Because people are hypnotized. They, like Tim mentioned, they go back to business as usual, and slowly they are getting poorer and poorer.
I want to wheel back to Constitution again, and a quote. I don't remember who said it, whether it was either Franklin or Jefferson, when he made the quote, "You have a republic if you can keep it." Right? They were leaving. The story goes, one of the founders was leaving the house late at night after working on the documentation, and a woman or a bystander approached and said, do we have a country? What do we have? What do we have? What do we have, sir? What do we have? And he says, a republic if you can keep it. So the republic is the model of the Constitution, correct? The Constitution holds the model, like a business model, identifies, right, the form and function of the government. If you can keep it. And that's the important phrase. And in that storytelling, that's what they're trying to remind the person who listens to that story. So for us, we discuss constitutional changes. We discuss the erosion of Canada's constitution. So we have a democracy if we can keep it. Questions of whether it should be some other form of government is moot. The fact is, what we have right now is a democracy, comma, if we can keep it. And we have proven that we can. Not only can we not keep it, but we have a government that has willfully discarded it. So one is to re-identify those elements and strengthen the weakness in the Constitution, bring it back to the people in some form which they will say, this is worth fighting for, because that's where we're going to end up. Sooner or later, there will be some type of conflict, because the conflict of the current government has already happened, where they, without firing a shot, executed a coup on the people on April 28th, right? So we have a country if we can keep it. And so far we have proven we cannot keep it. And that which you cannot keep, you do not deserve. It will be taken by those who do deserve it, because to the victor go the spoils. And in our soft post-enlightenment attitudes, and our bourgeois and laissez-faire behaviors, we have let go that which was paid for by the blood of our fathers and mothers before us and given to foreign entities.
It was funny because Monday it was a holiday in Canada. For the English part of Canada, it is Victoria Day. And for the Quebec province, it is the Day of the Patriots, 1837. And on the flag of the Patriot, you have a firearm. And there were one little, humorist, he took out the firearm. He said, those are the modern patriots. You don't have any firearms because we are, with the law that was implemented. Yeah. So, and the difference between Victoria Day and the Patriots means that we stand on different ground culturally and historically. And if we can resuscitate this feeling of patriotism. You mentioned the Constitution of the United States. When they were writing the Constitution, and in one book, Anna Arendt, she talks about the Constitution of the United States, the founding father made sure that the law or the amendment of the Constitution would go through time and would not be challenged by future generation, because they wanted to avoid conflict between generations. So in the Constitution, it is written so you do not deprive future generation, or you do not demise the heritage of the older generation. What are we seeing now? Some young generation, they cannot access housing, so they attack the boomers, quote unquote. The boomers attack the young generation because they say, oh, go to work. I worked 40 years in my life. Just move your ass and go to work, find a job. Then you have the immigrants. So we're all separated. A constitution, if we would rewrite a constitution for Canada, as per example, as a republic, we would have to think about long-term amendments that would enable people to be respectful toward each other. Well, that's the first thing. The second thing is, you mentioned moral code. We're all responsible for that. I am responsible for that, for this demise, because we were all a little bit lazy. Where when we're comfortable, we do not necessarily go and scream about our rights. We think that the system works, and the system slowly decay. And now many people are waking up, maybe 15-20%, and say, what happened? Our system is in danger. Well, you still have 80% of the population who sleeps. And like I mentioned, 9 million people who voted for the Liberal, maybe because they were afraid, because the elbows up and the orange man, or like you said, the Conservative, because they were with the Liberal. And we don't have a system anymore. Even the electoral system is broken. We're still in a minority government after the minority government was 2021. If it continues like this, why having election? Klaus Schwab was saying, AI will vote for you. Why we're having election? I think it's $1 billion per election that it's costing. Why do we have election if nothing changes? We have to question not only the system, but like you mentioned, the Constitution. We have to take this document, read it carefully, and see where it was violated by the government or by a corporation. Or we are in my opinion, we are at a historic moment. We have opportunities. We can do something. But like you mentioned, if we have 3 viewers, it will be a little bit hard.
And I think that we have been in a constitutional crisis since March the 20th of 2020.
Yes,
like
yes.
a definitive crisis, right? We know that we have been in some form of decline for at least throughout my generation, going back into the 67-ish, when Trudeau Sr. came on board and began the shenanigans.
1968,
right?
Yes.
When Marxism literally began to creep into the fabric of our bureaucratic layer, and then it corrupts everything above and below that.
Let's go back to solutions.
Go ahead.
The government is acting illegally, unlawfully. They're getting away with all of this stuff. Is this because of the bad appointments of judges, where the judges defer to the government? Yes. Or what about the fact that you're letting the fox guard the hen house? I mean, how could you have a system where the people that are supposed to manage law enforcement, they're like, how could you ask them to police themselves, is my question.
You bribe them. Come on, look at all the money they're spending. I'm discovering something very fascinating in Quebec, for example. The number of civil servants has increased 25% since 2018. And now, with a deficit this year of $14 billion, they say we will have to cut health services in hospital. But they again hired 4 or 5 senior manager who are paid $750,000 per year. And you say, wait a second, you don't have money, but you hire again another layer of bureaucrat. The more you have those layers of bureaucrat, they protect each other. It's a cult. And the ordinary citizens, they don't have the leverage to be able to break this. There's no solution, in my opinion, there's no solution politically. It's like Tim mentioned, it's a constitutional crisis. And I don't think that the solution will come from people. We can try, but I think history will unfold. Think about Soviet Union. Think about all the Eastern Bloc when it collapsed. It collapsed in 6 months, and every country was claiming their independence. Some of them they were claiming their independence. I would say peacefully. Some countries were not that peaceful. I think about Czechoslovakia or Serbia. It was very, very damageable, with the NATO intervention in 1999.
Chechnya, Georgia.
Chechnya was a very good example.
Georgia.
You can talk about Kazakhstan, Georgia, 2008. Those countries who proclaimed their sovereignty, they did not do it peacefully. And who suffered? It's not the elite that suffers. It's always the people.
No. It's always the people who are, well, it's the ordinary people who even though they're individually contributing the smallest amount in finances to the country, Freudian slip, though the smallest individual amount, because there are tens of millions of them, it ends up being the largest single line item on the budget of incoming revenue. Right. And so it's easy to abuse 10,000 of them because you're not going to miss it on the line item. I don't know if it's Stalin. It's credited to him, but I don't know if it's him saying a single murder is a tragedy. 1 million murders is a statistic.
Statistics. It is Stalin.
Right.
No, I think it is Lenin. My wife corrected me.
It's credited to one of those two. So I think Canada has two crises right now. Yes, the Parliament has proven that it is more than willing to completely railroad, sidetrack the entire Constitution using tools that were made possible by the Constitution, such as the War Measures Act, because the War Measures Act is an act of the will of the people who go to their representatives and say, prepare a document that will defend our nation in times of war from enemies within and without. And then so they use that, but that's actually a document that represents the will of the people. So it's an abuse of this trust relationship. So we have a constitutional crisis, and more so is this bribery crisis, because it is bribery, where you're literally buying votes by putting union members or union mentality employees, managers into positions of bureaucratic authority to gatekeep and protect the people above them. Right. So we made comments about 30% of the voting, the registered voters are union members, and being union members, they are very likely to vote NDP primarily and or Liberal Party.
I can guarantee you that they even vote for the Bloc in Quebec, because the Bloc is always painted as a, I would say, social democrat party. So of course they will not vote.
Right. So Parliament, and I don't care which party it is because they're all doing it, are hedging their bets by hiring people who will gatekeep to protect them from exposure for their dirty little tricks and their external relationships, the lobby groups that are paying them, et cetera, and to make sure that they stay in power by becoming that next large voting bloc. And that voting bloc ignores race. It ignores the ghettoization, a natural ghettoization of a civilization, because it's going after a particular economic or socioeconomic class. So you're creating a bourgeois class, creating that bourgeois upper class, and separating the lower class, which is a return to serfdom. We mentioned middle class in our
neo-feudalism.
Right. Yeah, neo-feudalism, because we're not there yet.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So in the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, when the term middle class, after The guilds. After the guilds start to evolve in Western Europe, and that idea, right around the time when Charles gets his fingers into it, which is kind of funny that it's the first Charles that did it, had his fingers into the guilds. The guilds, and these were usually named peoples, lower nobility or upper merchants, and right before industrialization, they began to demand respect as the middle class. But if we were to equate them in today's socioeconomic strata, that what we call middle class was actually nobility. You were the executive of a company, or you owned a company. That was the middle class in Western Europe at that time. So the term middle class now has moved down and down and down. With, you say there's the ultra rich, the poor, the very poor. That term middle class is a misnomer, and it literally applies to the poor, but the top layer of the poor.
Well, you talk about middle class. You talk about middle class. First of all, it's a modern expression, and I would make a small difference between what you're talking about, the guild. You know, the guild, they were artisan and they were independent. They were independent and they had their knowledge. You saw that with the monastery. All the knowledge was in the monastery, but you have all those artisans. Guy Debord, who was a French intellectual, he wrote in 1967, The Society of Spectacle. And in this, he's saying that people gained their freedom from serfdom and they became employees. So the middle class is not free in essence, because you have to be loyal to your employer, unless you have a small business. And if you arrive with the era of neoliberalism with Thatcher, Reagan, 1984, you start to see this middle class, or those independent small businesses, shrinking to the profit of big corporation, big platform. You know, the model of a shopping center and or Walmart. Yes. So what? And we saw the I would say the summum of this crisis, like you mentioned, in 2020, when they were closing small businesses, and you still had McDonald's, Harvey's, you still had those. They were closing all restaurants, but not the big, the fast food or the big I would say restoration platform. So what do we have now? It's a society that is fractured, and people try to survive. They try to stay afloat, and because they don't have the time to question the system politically, they avoid the question. It's more easy to avoid the question. You have a red light on your dash and goes and fail engine, and you just put a scotch tape on it. You put the tape on it. You don't want to see it. The car still runs. That's okay. The car still runs, so you can still go from point A to point B. But I think about the gas price. Now it's again rising, and some people, they say, I cannot even go to work anymore. It's so the constitutional crisis will start to show into the day-to-day life of people. And I think I would study again the Civil War in the United States, because when Hannah Arendt, she compares the three constitution, or the three revolution movement that we know in the last 300 years: United States, France, and Russia. She says, she wrote, there was no really civil war in the United States because all the settlers, they were independent, they were strong, and they had the possibility to, even if they disagree, they were still debating. So the Constitution was written. It was not like the bloodshed in France for 5 years. They called it the terror. That you could not walk in the street of Paris because it was so slippery, because it was full of blood. You know, and I will not even talk about the Bolshevik coup. So I think we could study this moment in the history of the United States to, I would say, to help us restructure, rewrite a constitution that would be fair, with counterpower, with accountabilities. This is a very big job. We need help. Who will do that? A lot of people don't care about. They never read the Constitution in their life. They're not even capable of reading a 2-page article in a newspaper. So you need people who will sit down and think about all those amendments that would help evolve into another system.
And see, I was that kid. I was that 12-year-old kid back in the early 80s who had a framed copy of the 82 Constitution and Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights and Responsibilities beside it. I was that kid.
Yeah, but you're not a normal kid.
Well, I can't be a normal kid because you look at that flag behind me. 1965, when the Maple Leaf became Canada's national flag, my father was in the Guardsmen, the bearskin hats and the red monkey suits on Parliament Hill, but at that time they were an elite force. My father was one of them, and he was handpicked of 4 color guard who took the Canadian flag to every legislature in Canada in 1965. That means he was 20 years old, right? A Newfoundlander in Canada in the military, picked among 4 men in the entire country to be the color guard to bear the first Maple Leaf flag to every legislature in Canada. That was my father. So I'm a little bit sensitive about this stuff. Right?
Well, your Canadian flag now is upside down. I know why.
It is, and my dad would be angry.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yep. You're not afraid that the leaves will fall. It doesn't hang by nothing. That's the state of Canada. Canada doesn't hang by nothing.
You make a falling leaf statement, and I immediately think of what Alberta's dealing with.
That's a good way.
As if a falling leaf is actually a symbol of separation, or the spirit of separation, or the angst of being treated poorly by the remainder of Confederation. So maybe Payman, we have to look at some type of confederation that permits members to come and go under certain circumstances.
Try this with the European Union. Jean-Claude Juncker, who was the predecessor of Ursula von der Leyen, about 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when he retired, he said, "There's no treaty or no agreement for a country to get out of the European Union. It does not exist. Meaning, it does not exist. You cannot go out." You saw with what happened with the Brexit. It was a joke, and we can talk about UK, but I agree with you on one point. You know what is happening now in Alberta? People are frustrated and they react with anger. Instead of reuniting each, and everybody from either from the People's Party, the Conservative, all the people who would like to see Canada as a strong country with a good ally like United States, we have to be able to talk to each other. Can we talk to each other? Are we ready? Are we mature enough to talk to each other? Because in Alberta, they are reacting because they're upset because the Conservative Party was beaten in the last election, and now they say, "Okay, we were stuck with we knew it, we lost, so let's go out." I understand that, but they are acting with frustration instead of trying to be diplomatic. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe they have to separate.
So I prefer that Canada remain as a confederation with its existing provinces, territories, and boundaries. However, Sue makes an interesting point. We could always go green, white, and pink and tell the rest of North America to piss off. Because in 1948-49, it was America and Canada that were courting Newfoundland and Labrador. America had military bases in Argentia on the south coast, which never freezes over. So that's where their naval bases were. And they had Happy Valley Goose Bay, which was in Labrador, and Gander, which is the most eastern full-scale landing strip in the continental North America. So Newfoundland, the island, was of extraordinary strategic value to the United States leading up to NATO and other North Atlantic agreements. So America was very, very keen on convincing or cajoling or welcoming Newfoundland to come join, and not too difficult of a press, because a lot of Newfoundlanders have relatives who may be 2, 3, 4 generations separated, but along the entire northeast Atlantic coast, right? So it wasn't too difficult a cultural exchange to make that happen. But nearer toward the end of Canada and Britain, America courting Newfoundland and Labrador, the British Crown, through the Privy Council, said to Canada, you will negotiate terms with Newfoundland and Labrador, because we're not losing more North American territory, and we're certainly not giving it to the Americans. And that's the basis for the current relationship. So when you look at Rupert's Land, so now let's take a look at what happened with right, and there were many Newfoundlanders who supported joining the United States. You look towards Rupert's Land, and as those 4 provinces, the west of Ontario, came into Confederation, and the way they came in, British Columbia was last, 1908. I think Alberta was 1905, and British Columbia was 1908. But before that, it was an virtually independent country of its own, simply because of the geographic separation from the western of Canada, and the fact that it was on the opposite side of the planet compared to Britain. So it was Britain that wanted Canada to expand and to create a domain from coast to coast. It was not necessarily Canadians who wanted to expand.
That was a colony.
Right.
They did it with Australia. They did it with
Right.
New Zealand. They,
Right.
the concept of the empire.
Well, the sun never sets.
Well, what we call the difference between a continental empire and a naval empire is that Great Britain was having colony encounters, and they export. You know what they do? They export instability outside of the center. The London is the place for democracy, but outside it's free for all. And that's what America didn't want to accept when they started to challenge the center, when we call the center, and look at what is happening now in New Zealand and in Australia. We have the Five Eyes, so there's another layer of power, and it is military power, military alliance. And I see the maneuver of Carney, for example, with London. Not forget about banking. Now they want to supply $800 billion to Ukraine from the European Union, and Carney $800 billion. And where do you think they will take this money? They will take this money from people. But don't forget one thing: Carney signed a deal to supply, in the next 10 years, $50 billion to Ukraine, $5 billion per year. So where is the legitimacy? He's signing treaties, and he has no legitimacy because he has no opposition. He has no majority, and it is not in his program. So it is not only a coup, he's a traitor to the nation. If we consider Canada a nation, he's a traitor to the nation. People have to understand that this man is not legitimate at all.
Well, it's still a nation on the letterhead, and the name on the check says Government of Canada. Right?
Of course, it's a paper constitution.
Right. So I guess we have a similar. You mentioned how quickly nations were being restructured with the rise of socialism, how quickly the satellite nations were dragged underneath the boot of Lenin and Stalin, and then with the collapse, perestroika and Solidarność really put the nail in that coffin, right? But so Solidarność and Glasnost, that, well, I guess I said the Solidarity put the nail in the coffin, but Glasnost and perestroika basically,
well,
killed in the womb whatever capacity Russia had to rebirth itself from the ashes and reestablish some form of internal capitalist structure.
If we can bring it back to Canada,
okay, so
Andre,
let me try to bring it back. What we have here is Canada at risk of an informal collapse. So if we're going to use formal structure to rebuild it, then we have to look at the Constitution, open it up and strengthen it, and plug and deal and sort out the weaknesses. Of equal importance is putting teeth into the Constitution. And our jurisprudence does not defend the Constitution. Right?
Well, what you're mentioning, I think about Alberta, and I would say we're talking about Constitution. I did not study law in university. I read the Constitution many times. I'm a writer. I try to think by myself, but I'm not a lawyer, so I could not challenge a lawyer on the Constitution. Where are those people who will try to challenge Daniel Smith, for example, if they win a referendum and they go to Ottawa and they say, now we have leverage to negotiate. Either you change the formula of the equalization, you do some reform, or we just go out. You think they will let them go out? They will do everything they can to derail the process. And I would understand Albertan people to be very angry because you have to negotiate now. It's not a question of they have to negotiate. And the government of Canada does not negotiate with its subject or its peasant. They are treating us like peasants.
And then we need to stop negotiating.
Well, that's
why are we hiring lawyers when the judges are already told, I don't care how much money gets spent on this, you don't judge in favor of the plaintiff.
That's
right. So that if we were past being able to trust jurisprudence, what's next?
Well, when I talk about lawyers, constitutional lawyer who would have the duty of reading and trying to reorganize or to reform the Constitution, I think there are some very intelligent people, some very intelligent lawyers, but they do not. Where were they, those lawyers, when we had the COVID mandate and we were locked down? They never defend people because most of them, they benefit from the system. So they will not go against the system. The solution has to come from outside. The system will not reform itself because it works. It works. People are getting poorer and poorer. And one day they are not, or maybe they are aware that they will have civil disobedience. It was an RCMP report that was writing. I'm not inventing it. I'm not inventing this. The RCMP was saying that in this report that they are afraid that there will be civil disobedience in Canada in 2027. It's in 2 years. If you continue on this path, and maybe they want to create the crisis to implement another a martial law. Don't forget what is happening now in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Yemen. We have international conflict everywhere. Canada is a small country, and Canada has to choose wisely. You align with the European Union, which is, in my opinion, fascist and totalitarian structure, or you align with the United States, who still have a certain level of democracy, They have counterpower. They still have the Second Amendment. They still have, and I'm not talking about Trump, and I'm not talking about the Trump administration. I'm talking about the structure of the system. But Canada has to choose wisely, and they didn't. 9 million people chose to vote for a man who has no legitimacy in Canada at all.
So going back to what you said, Andre, you mentioned 30%. I'm thinking solutions. 30% public sector employees. That's creating it's like a situation where the government can lie about the GDP. They can say that the GDP is growing, but they're hiring people. It's really strange. If it was a private company and if I just hired more employees, I couldn't say that my profits are going up. What about this? Like, make it so that you can't go into debt, make it so that you have to collect the money before you can spend it, and make it a constitutional amendment that sovereign debt, passing debt on to people that aren't born yet, is illegal. Would that solve the problem?
Well, no, that's the goal. Let's say that's one goal that you want to achieve, and then you need a strategy to achieve this goal. Let's say you have 30% of bureaucracy, and you say, okay, I will lay off 15% of that. What do you do with those people? They will fight. Because they want to keep their privilege of their job. But if you can prove that they are not efficient because the bureaucracy is too heavy, you need a strategy. You need to be able to convince those people. Those people will not leave their job willingly. It's like Donald Trump asking people, you can, or it's like you're an illegal immigrant. We ask you to leave voluntarily. Come on, be serious. They came here illegally. Do you think they will leave? So if you have a goal like this, which is good, you need a strategy to implement this, to achieve this goal. And this is complicated.
I get what you're saying, like the rollout. So this is like, it's a rape, it's a plunder of our treasure. So you have people like the three of us that are working hard, and we have to pay taxes for these freeloaders that don't do anything. Yes. And I understand you're saying those freeloaders aren't just going to give that money back willingly.
Of course not. Of course not.
What I'm saying is, let's cross that bridge at another point. Like, would we want to move to a society where we have this in our constitution, and would that help, or would that just be window dressing?
Well, I think
it's not window dressing if it can be enforced.
Well, I ended up with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and it was very funny because the quote is, okay, when you talk to somebody and you try to convince the person, speak very softly, but have a baseball bat in your hand. It means that you can say to the person, okay, you have to, but you need coercion. You cannot just rely on speeches. It doesn't work. That's why in a society, what you have the government or the crown, whatever it is, a monarchy. You have the people, and you have the counterbalance, which is the army or the aristocrat, who will try to be like referees. What do we have here in Canada? The police is a police it's a police state. We were talking about GPU yesterday in Soviet Union. They do not help normal citizen in small crime. They like Tim said, the person is prosecuted and just put them out. They release them on the street and they start again. Of course, if you commit a crime and you know that you will not be punished, why not? That's a lack of morale that we're facing now. And I think that many people are fed up, but they don't know how to act. How can we act? Tim always mentioning locally, yes, I agree with you, going to town hall, but there's a limit to that strategy.
Unfortunately, what I was harping on before the election, starting to pale in value. Because I think we've gone over the tipping point, right? I think that as much as I would like to see a strengthened constitution in Canada that had teeth to give us the keel, right? And to get straight in the water again, I don't think we have the will of the people or the will of the justice system or the will of the police system to bring it back in line. Because I go downtown and I watch the homeless are quietly corralled away from the more affluent sections of the city, because the more affluent people of the city tell the mayoralty, keep that shit off my street or else, and the or else involves money or votes or et cetera. And so the mayoralty tells the police, keep this shit out of that part of town, push it into the old part of town where nobody down there can tell me what to do or has any sway over me. And so when I see in broad daylight on strip malls downtown in the alcoves, bums and people still on doing drugs in plain sight, all humped over from fentanyl and other medications and stuff in various forms of dress and undress, pushing sometimes 3 grocery carts chained to each other. This is a reality, and it's no longer hyperbole, it's becoming common. So when we have a jurisprudence system that permits this to happen, when we have a mayorality, so your base layer of government, what did I say earlier today? More than 5,000 municipalities in Canada. So we worry about one Parliament Hill, but there are 5,000 mayors making this happen. Right? So do I want a constitution that's strong enough to? Yes, but I don't believe the integrity of anybody in the political system anymore. Like, no sitting member in any level of government has any integrity, because if they had an ounce of it, they would speak up all day long. Why? Because you're getting paid to stand up and do your damn job. At least if you can't fight something because your house is shut down or you're not in session or whatever, the least you can do is get on a friggin' microphone and make your voice heard, because you're supposed to be a goddamn representative.
Well,
and they're not. And they're not.
There's a small polemic in Quebec now because of the carbon tax. And there's a by-election in the provincial government in Quebec. And the leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec, Éric Duhaime, is running in this by-election. And they put a candidate for the Parti Québécois, and the leader of the Parti Québécois said, and I quote, he said, if we get out of the carbon tax, which is the speedy, it is this carbon emission. If we get out of it, we will be facing a lawsuit and penalties. And Éric Duhaime, and he lied directly to the public. And Éric Duhaime, when a journalist asked him that, Éric Duhaime, he said, I have all the data. When Ontario got out of the carbon tax in 2018, it costed nothing. And there's nothing, it will cost nothing for Quebec to get out of this Quebec carbon tax of carbon emission with California. And he said, and I quote, he said, even California is in negotiation with the federal government in the United States to drop down those emission taxes. So the man is a leader of Parti Québécois, and he lies directly to the public. He lies, and he doesn't care that he lies. They lie constantly, and we know that they're lying. They know that we know that they're lying, but they continue to do it, and people are starting to be fed up, to be lied to in front of their face all the time. No accountability. They will face consequences. It will come. History is always the same pattern. They don't want to listen. One day people will be fed up. That's what I'm afraid of. People will take justice in their own hand.
I kind of understand where you guys are going with that, Tim, specifically. You're saying we need to reconstitute like a sense of morality. Otherwise, these laws don't matter. There's a Supreme Court justice out of the U.S. I forget his name, the guy who passed Chevron deference. He looks like Paul Sorvino, fat Italian guy. Anyway.
That's Scarelli.
No, not Scarelli, but it sounds like Scarelli. It's something like that. Anyway, they asked them about, why do we have like freedom of speech and the right to bear arms in the U.S. Constitution, but it doesn't specifically mention, like the right to safe foods or healthy foods or healthcare. And he said what they did was the founding fathers in the U.S., they looked at how the princes in Europe enslaved the population. So if they said anything against the princes, they would get executed. They disarmed the public so that they could, their security forces could take over. And all they did was they flipped that. And I'm trying to do the same thing here in Canada. I'm not saying we're magically going to get a constitutional republic, but like what? Let's identify the means by which they're crushing us, and let's see if we can flip it around. That's why I gave that example of the debt.
Yeah, I like the idea of holding all levels of government criminally accountable for mismanagement of public funds. Right? And so then you can break that down however you want. But public officers, and that includes bureaucrats, should be held criminally accountable for the mismanagement of public funds.
Okay, so would a constitution, it would say that you can have no immunity for any elected officials.
Yeah.
No, but there's, the counterpart for that is that you will, many good people will not ride in an election or will not run for office because they will be afraid of consequences. That's, there's a balance between accountability and duty. And we can see it. When I was working in Hydro-Quebec in 2001, it was quite funny because I was working with the high management and I saw a policy that was implemented, that they were protecting high-ranked manager from prosecution. It was the company that was. So you can imagine a citizen who is, harmed by a decision of a senior officer in a company, and he brings this officer to court, let's say criminal court, and the company defends him with his own electricity bill or his own tax. So it means that I want to prosecute Justin Trudeau, I cannot. If I prosecute him, the government will hire lawyers to defend him, and I'm paying the lawyers with my tax. This is completely absurd. We are in this situation since 1999, and nobody noticed it. And every time you have, I take the example of Walkerton 2007. The 7 people died because of E. coli, and the man made 7. The man was in charge of the water system. Well, he was charged. He was charged, criminally charged, and he had to do 7 years in jail. After that, I think they commuted his sentence, but he was still prosecuted criminally. And criminally means you do jail time, but the crown, the government, defended him with tax money. You need, we talk about accountability. All the MPs, the MLA, mayor, councillor, they're all protected by this structured system. The idea is not to destroy the system, because I think the structure of the system is good. Tim mentioned it. The idea is to have more watchdog.
So
we don't have that.
Let's say, because we put such a hard limit or a penalty, right, on public agents who abuse the people's money, and that is going to limit the number of people who might want to engage in public office because of the increased degree of very personal criminal risk.
They will think twice.
So what?
No, I agree with you. They will think twice.
Let me follow up with what Tim is saying.
What's the word? As little government as the people can tolerate.
Yes.
So
yes.
You pay them well. You pay them well. Right? You treat them well because they're to a degree an elected nobility, but they must operate with noblesse oblige. They must, and be held criminally accountable. And if they cannot agree to that, don't be a candidate. End of story.
Yes, you're right.
That practice itself, by raising the bar and saying, if this is not a cushy job, you will work to maintain integrity. And the Constitution can provide other safeguards, such as no corporation can hold a lobby. Over. Those days are done. Done. No company can go to the government and lobby the government. An individual citizen, yes. But no company. You end the lobby, because that's the end of that influence. So the part of the primary problem is that elected officials are being swayed by external forces, agents and agencies, I call them. They're being swayed and or influenced and or paid off and or blackmailed and or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You prevent that group from getting to the door, and you remind these elected officials, Only the people whose taxes you are taking do you represent. End of story. So yes, you're putting a very high bar of criminal prosecution for those who abuse the people, but you also have to make sure that you put a hedge of protection around them to make sure that the only influence is the voter and the citizen. And the Constitution can do that by no more lobbies. Done.
What about recall?
Recall is another tool, but I think that if you, I'm going to use the phrase the wrong way, provide a safe work environment, right? Then you are a lot less likely to need. I'd say we should have a recall device, absolutely, but you would be a lot less likely to need it because the incidence of insubordinate behavior requiring a recall would drop. And I think really at Ontario, BC, and Alberta have recall. I don't know that the other provinces have recall.
Yeah, but
in Quebec we don't have that.
No.
We don't. But one thing you mentioned, and I think it is important to say it again. You talk about accountability. If we rewrite the Constitution and we implement or integrate those mechanisms, we need to be able to reform the justice system. Mm-hmm. How do we do that? Because even if you write the document, it's very well written. Let's say a majority of Canadians agrees on the text. How do you implement it? Because you will touch lobbies and you will touch system that will resist. We have to compose with resistance.
Yeah. Then I would propose that the justice system also fall under those rules, and we begin electing our judges.
Well, in 2012,
because if you elect your judge as a representative and for jurisprudence, he falls under the same sections and clauses as a legislative, like a member of parliament or a member of parliament, right?
Okay. But in 2012, François Legault was a minister in the cabinet of Pauline Marois with the Parti Québécois, and after that he resigned. And he created the Coalition Avenir Québec. Now he's Prime Minister of Quebec. And in 2012, he gave an interview and he said, "We will remove everybody in power that does not think like us." That was in 2012. Now it is 2025, and he did exactly what he said in 2012. He's a globalist, and he's removing everybody in power that do not agree with this United Nations agenda. It is municipal, provincial, and federal. And now there's a pushback because you have the BRICS internationally, and there's a lot of people who are saying, wait a second, we do not agree. United Nations is starting to have problem with funding. We saw it with the World Health Organization. Now international institutions are starting to have problem. They don't have legitimacy anymore. So when you were mentioning nationally in Canada, we will have also to treat NGOs, lobbies. We have to put them in their place. And you saw what happened with the Doge, USAID. They start to defund them. You defund them completely.
And so then let's deal with Canada's version of USAID, which is our foreign, right? Our foreign minister.
Yes.
Right? That falls underneath the foreign minister. So how do we deal with that? We leave the UN.
Well, it is funny because 2 days ago, the Treaty on Pandemic was signed by 173 countries, including Canada, without any debate. And United States, through John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. John, what's his name? I forgot. Robert Kennedy Jr. Is that ministry? Yes, he said we have to. They will get out of the World Health Organization, and they're defunding it. So we have to get out of United Nations, and don't think about NATO. NATO is a paper tiger. NATO is collapsing everywhere, and NATO cannot even stand China or Russia. I'm not talking about Iran. Yeah. That's another topic. But all those international institutions who are corrupted and who are dysfunctional and even evil, we have to distance ourselves and regain real diplomacy with allies, even with enemies. If we have enemies, we have to be able to discuss. If we do not discuss, we will end up in conflict. It's not complete. There's no diplomacy now. It does not exist.
So then
Not in the West.
The Constitution codifies that our military defense forces at home and abroad, but particularly at home, effectively establish castle doctrine around the boundaries of Canada.
Well, that's one thing.
And the Constitution sets that up and guarantees that at no point in time does Chrétien gut the Canadian military by a third in 5 years. None of that nonsense. Any relationship, and that Canada does not join other organizations such as NATO, but other nations may enlist in alliances requesting Canada's assistance from time to time, as is brought to the Parliament for they have to pass a bill in order to do it, right? So if every major international activity must be brought to Parliament, not played out in closed doors behind.
Yes, that's what they do all the time. Law-based, that's what they do all the time.
It must be done in public. Then that assists with that. So it's you eliminate the in-camera discussions. You reduce the number of bureaucrats involved because a minister's managers will be basically standing beside the minister in the House because he's the one presenting the documents. So you reduce bloat. You reduce bloat by making the minister themselves responsible. So you say to the minister, is the budget for your ministry, is that up to snuff? Because we're sending it off to be checked. And if it's not, you're the one taking the hit.
You're the one that will
right? Not the office underneath you. You're taking the hit. So that immediately says that they must be more physically engaged in the actual practice or operations of their ministry. And you remove bloat by you making them physically responsible.
Well, you know why? When you think about NATO or you think about sovereignty or border, why do you think we don't have borders anymore? Everything is open. They destroyed the army. That was the purpose. They did it on purpose. They did not hide it. They did it on purpose. Think about NATO. I can agree and disagree with Trump, but when he said we never put 2% of the GDP in NATO, and NATO was supposed to be the structure that would provide security and sovereignty. If for a country like Canada, you're 41 million and you say you don't want to have an army, you need someone who will protect you. Costa Rica doesn't have an army at all. It's in the Constitution. They don't have an army, but they have a big brother who will take care of them. It's United States. You don't need an army. But you have to also to comply to maybe the desiderata of United States. That's the counter. If in Canada we would say our sovereignty is important, first of all, you have to defend it. If you cannot, you will need somebody who will help you defend it.
So then ultimately, Canada going forward as a nation with the existing borders and relationships has to decide if it wants to be vassal to the United States or an equal partner as a sovereign nation. And if it cannot make that decision, it will be made a vassal by the United States, merely by the nature of the military and economic influence that America holds over the northern half of the North American continent. Because regardless of what we think or don't think about Russia, the Arctic must be defended because all of Europe is on the other side.
Yes,
including China.
Including China. And you know China. This is why when I hear you, this is why the concept of the 51st state starts to be legitimate. It's not to destroy the history of Canada, but global politics is shifting. It is shifting now, and I can talk about Russia and how Russia in the last how Putin with the conversation with Trump Monday. There's a joke on internet. Trump says, "How many oblasts? It is 5," and Putin answers, "No, it is 8." including Odessa, Kharkov, and so I can guarantee you the zone of influence of Russia is growing. Why? Because you have war. You are countries that are at war with them, and they will not back down. United States would act the same way with an alliance with Canada, saying, okay, keep your territory, keep your borders, your sovereignty, you have a constitution. We agree to be allies, but you're smaller than me. So I will have to protect you, but you have to give me something in return. It is normal. If you don't have if you cannot put your 2% of the GDP for your own defense, forget about NATO, for example. If you cannot put 2% of the GDP, you will have to include something in the Constitution saying that I will be the protector. This is I would say a diplomatic way of discussing with allies. You do and not treat.
In which case, it's no longer a constitution; it's a contract.
But it's a contract. It's a contract. But the Constitution,
so
the Constitution.
If Canada wants sovereignty, if citizens want sovereignty, they must have and hold a constitution.
Yes.
So Payman's desire to see an effective, lasting constitution must be an act of the majority of the will of the people. And they must be prepared to socioeconomically and militarily and lawfare, whatever, all the forms of social structure, be prepared to defend it with their lives or their livelihoods. We're so afraid to shed blood that we won't acknowledge the plain hard truth that in the movie The Patriot, Mel Gibson has the musket, and that musket is the entire point of the film. Right? So when he is pulled away from his farm and his comfortable life and forced to defend because his son is murdered on his own step, right? If that's what it takes, it's going to be really messy up here. It's going to be really messy. And it won't be America that does it. It'll be internal.
Yes, that's I agree with you. You know, in Canada, we always say Canadian, they are kind, they are civilized. But if we do not talk about this, yes, you will see a bloodshed, and it will be even worse. We have to. Sometimes we can disagree and be, determined and aggressive in our negotiation. But still, first of all, being respectful doesn't mean that you have to be weak.
Right.
You can speak with a diplomatic language and not aggress. I remember, it's very funny. I remember Trudeau. Oh, Putin is a dictator. Wait a second, man. You are the prime minister of me. I can say this in my kitchen to my friend, and I can look like a fool. I'm not a civil servant. I'm not a statesman. But if I would become a statesman, I have to adopt I have to adapt my language to the level. And if I don't do this, I don't belong there.
Because you're a MLA or an MP or a minister or the prime minister. You are being paid to represent a brand, a company, a country, a sports team, or whatever. You are being paid to represent a brand. Your personal idiocy needs to be left on the table when you go to work.
Exactly.
Period. I do the same thing. I shoot my mouth off all day long. But when I go to work for somebody, I wear their brand.
And a tie.
Not if I have to. Right? So Payman, yes. Do I want us to have a constitution? Well, obviously. And I have, and it's in my name, right? I want to see my father's legacy passed on, and I want that to be something proud. And I would like the Dominion of Canada to remain in some strength and form. But if the people don't want it, we will lose it. We have a republic, change the word, if you can keep it.
Tim, you're mentioning this, and I think the federal government now, if we can still call it the federal government, they're stuck with a constitutional crisis, because it's not only Alberta, even Quebecers, they're stuck now because they're watching Alberta and separatists in Quebec. They say we support Alberta, hoping that Alberta will go out, that Canada will collapse, and that they will be able to do their sovereignty without any fight. They don't want to fight in Quebec.
So they want to divorce the old man, but if he dies, it won't cost him anything.
That's the best analogy that I ever heard. Yes, they don't want the Parti Québécois in Quebec was what we call. You know what they did in 2018 under the leadership of Jean-François Lisée, who was the advisor of Robert Bourassa many years ago. They removed the Article 1 of the Parti Québécois, and the Article 1 was the first article of the party, of the Constitution, is make the independence of Quebec. They removed it in 2018. So imagine in 2025, we will do sovereignty. No, you will not do it because you don't have it in your Constitution.
No mandate.
You're waiting for Alberta to do the dirty job for you.
Yeah.
This fascinating. Now I see separatists in Quebec. They're stuck. They're globalists. They do not want to separate.
Yeah.
They want to be vassal.
Well, because Alberta is the cash cow.
It's the cash cow, and they have I think they have the strength, the political strength to challenge the government. In Quebec, we don't have that. Yeah. We have weak politicians who play the game of federal provincial fight, sovereignty, the culture of Quebec, the distinct society. They play with this all the time to lure the people and to keep their privileges. That's what is happening now in Quebec.
Yeah. So, Payman, my thought moving forward in these conversations is that if we were to look for a guiding document to reform or strengthen the Constitution, I would use Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights and Responsibilities as the foundational document, because we know that what Trudeau did to 1982 document is shenanigans, because that document we don't have Quebec as a signer, and that's kind of important because it's a third of the country. Regardless of Quebec's behavior individually or as a province or a member of confederation, you're not a confederation if one of your members, one full third, are throwing up fists right every time you try to do something at a national level. However, they agreed to the Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. They signed on. Use that. That's a foundational document. And I'm interested in that because it's and responsibilities. It establishes the two-way relationship between the citizens and the government.
There's one thing that you're mentioning about Quebec, and I hope I will have Sue Keller-Dyer in an interview eventually. I invited her, and she agreed. But we want to talk about national policy on energy and natural resources. And last week, François Legault opened the door to a Trans-Canada pipeline. He opened the door, and it infuriated Blanchette from the Bloc Québécois, who said just during the campaign, there will never be a pipeline. It's very funny. They did Nord Stream. Now they're doing Turkish Stream. They do it everywhere on the planet except in Canada. And Legault had to open the door to a pipeline because I think he's starting to feel, first of all, he will lose the election next year if there's one. And he's starting to fear that he will be put aside because the global agenda is it's leaking. You can see it with the Brookfield. You can see how they try to patch the sinking ship, but everywhere it's the which company abandoned the 2050 net zero agenda. It was in the news today. I forgot what?
Enbridge.
They abandoned. Now they're all abandoned. Last year it was DEI. That's a joke. But anyway, they're abandoning the 2050. Goldman Sachs abandoned it. All those great financial structure, they're abandoning it because they see that the climate change hoax is falling. It is falling. Everybody's challenging it. We
And
defy
those-
it. I can talk about windmill. I can talk about solar panel. I can talk about solar energy, methanization, and everything. So when we see this, if we want to do a transition toward a 21st century civilization in the Western world, we have to rewrite this constitution. We have to be sovereign, and we have to define who are our allies and who are our competitors. Let's not call them enemies, competitors.
So let's say
We're at the 90-minute mark, so let's start wrapping it up.
let's say someone were to get control of a political party, the Conservatives or some other agency, and to produce a strengthened constitution, then that party would platform the constitution as its only goal.
I think so.
Right? Because at least for that first term, like if they were to win elected to government, that would be their sole goal. Everything else falls out of that to restructure everything from that. So theoretically, you could have a political party, a federal political party, whose only goal in the next 4 years was to educate everybody on the Constitution and how valuable it is, how important it is that everybody participate.
But to be able to do this, let's say on a 4-year term, and then after that you have a middle term goal and a long-term goal, 10 years,
Sure.
20 years. You still have to think for 4 years. When you think about education, it means that you have to educate people, you have to debate, you have to be able to have public debate. In 2008, we had this national debate in Quebec on the Bill 99, which called the secular state in Quebec. And there was a commission in the National Assembly. It took 8 months, and you had group who were coming and explaining why you should have a secular state and no religious sign and philosopher. It took eight months, and after that they implemented the chart. That was defeated, but still the process is long. So 4 years to implement a constitution would mean also to be able to reverse the actual tide, because now it's not what we're seeing. That could be a threat to the project.
There's a line from one of the prophets in the Old Testament that says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge," but the word also is lack of vision, and saying this is the foundational document on which our nation stands. Then you give people the vision of a rejuvenated, re-energized, re-strengthened constitution. That's the roots of the tree of a rebirthed Canada. And that could give people hope. That could turn Quebec around, and it would certainly turn Alberta around.
I hope.
So, Andre, do you want to have the final words?
No, I leave it to Tim. I think it is. It's a very proper conclusion.
We're good.
All right. Well,
we are disciplined today, Payman.
Let's do a constitution. I don't know. Payman still didn't get a word in edgewise.
a big thank you to the audience, and we'll see you next week. Take care, guys.
Thanks.